Chapter 2. Time is more valuable than money. Why you can and should retire early. If some 90-year-old rich dude offered you $100 million to trade places with him, would you do it? Of course not. Why? Because time is more valuable than money. The average person has approximately 25,000 days to live in their adult life. If you're reading this book, you likely need to trade your time for money in order to live a life that is safe, healthy, and happy. But if you didn't have to work to make money, you'd be able to spend that time however you wanted. No one cares about your time as much as you do. People will try to take your time and fill it up with meetings and calls and more meetings. But it's your time. Your only time. This book is designed to help you make the most of it. Make money by time. The goal of this book is to help you retire as early as possible. When I say retire, I don't mean that you will never work again, only that you'll have enough money so that you never have to work again. This is complete financial freedom. The ability to do whatever you want with your time. I don't ever plan to retire in the traditional sense of the word. But you could say that I'm retired now because I have enough money and freedom to spend my time doing whatever I want. I no longer have to work for money, but I still enjoy making money, and it's attached to many of the things I enjoy doing. I love working and challenging myself and hopefully always will, so checking out to a life of leisure just isn't my vibe. If you want to retire sooner rather than later, you need to rethink everything you've been taught about retirement and probably most of what you've been taught about money. As a society, we have collectively adopted one approach to retiring. Get a job, set aside a certain portion of your income in a 401 or other retirement account, and in 40+ years you'll have enough money saved that you can stop working for good. This approach is designed to get you to retire in your 60s or 70s, which explains why pretty much every advertisement about retirement shows silver-haired grandmas and grandpas. There are 3 major problems with this approach. 1. It doesn't work for most people. 2. You end up spending the most valuable years of your life working for money. 3. It's not designed to help you retire as quickly as possible. We'll start with the first problem. To illustrate why traditional retirement advice doesn't work, I'd like to introduce you to Travis. Travis is an old friend of my parents, so I've known him for a long time. Back in 2012, when I was already well into my quest to become a millionaire by 30, I ran into Travis at a holiday party thrown by another family friend. While schmoozing with the other guests and snacking on Virginia honey ham in my festive holiday jacket, I struck up a conversation with Travis, who had heard that I was thinking of starting a business. Travis and I typically see each other only once a year at this holiday party, so he had no idea that I'd made almost $300,000 in the past year by pursuing a whole bunch of opportunities, building websites, running ad campaigns, flipping domain names, selling mopeds, and various other things. So you want to be an entrepreneur? Travis said. Pretty cool, man, but it's going to be pretty tough at first. It always is for entrepreneurs. You've got to make sure to save some money. I've been saving 5% of my income for retirement since I started working, and I'm planning to retire in the next 10 years. Travis was about 45 at this time and had been working for 20 years. I asked him how he had decided to save 5% of his income for retirement back in his 20s. Oh, back when I first started out, he said, a coworker of mine told me I should start saving that much, so I did. I was speechless. By this point I had read hundreds of books about investing and personal finance, and I knew that, despite his confidence, Travis was probably never going to be able to retire, let alone in the next 10 years. I don't have access to Travis's financial statements, so it's possible he has some savings, income, or assets that I don't know about. But let's assume all he has is his income and whatever he's set aside for retirement since he entered the workforce. Travis is a project manager at an energy consulting company. I don't know what he takes home, but according to websites like PayScale and Glassdoor, he probably makes about $60,000 a year. Even though I don't know his exact salary, I know a lot about what Travis spends his money on because my parents have known him for a long time. In the past 3 years, he has bought a new house, redone the kitchen and put an addition on the new house, and bought not 1, but 2 new cars. By outward appearances, the dude is living like a king. But based on what he's likely earning, he's probably living on an insane amount of credit to afford this lifestyle, even when you factor in his wife's income. She works in a similar role and likely makes about the same amount of money as Travis. Neither Travis nor his wife come from money, so a big inheritance to offset their spending is unlikely. Let's take a quick look at the numbers. If Travis has been saving 5% of a $60,000 annual salary, that means he's saving about $3,000 per year. Even if he's been making $60,000 a year since he was in his mid-20s, he would have set aside only $60,000 total by now. If he's invested that money in his company's 401 and his company has matched the standard 3% of his contribution over that period, he'd have an additional $36,000 saved, for a total of $96,000. Thanks to the magic of compounding, any contributions he's made will have grown for as long as they've been invested. We can't know exactly how much his 401 would be worth without knowing what specific assets he has invested in, but we can be fairly certain that it's worth more than his original investment. Compounding accelerates money growth and will make you richer. There is a reason Einstein is said to have called compounding the eighth wonder of the world, because it's so amazing. Compounding exponentially increases the value of your money over time, even if you don't increase your investments, because your interest grows interest. The key to fast-tracking financial freedom is to speed up compounding by making and investing as much money as early and frequently as you can. Here's how it works. As a stock goes up, the value of any money invested in that stock increases by a certain percentage. The growth is known as interest. If the stock keeps going up, then both your original contribution and the past interest keep growing. Over time, the more money you invest and the more the interest grows, the faster your money compounds. It looks like a curve, as you'll see in the graphs on this page. Of course, the earnings of the stock market can vary wildly from month to month and from year to year, but over the long term, many economists have found that the real dollar returns of the U.S. stock market average between 7 and 9% per year. However, when it comes to estimating potential stock market returns, it's better to be a bit more conservative. So for this reason, I'll be using 7% as the estimated stock market rate of return throughout the course of this book. For the sake of simplicity, to illustrate the impact of compounding, let's say the market grows by 10% in a given year. If you invest $100 and it grows by 10%, you will have $110 at the end of the year. If the market grows by another 10% the following year, you will earn 10% not only on your original $100 investment but also on the $10 return you earned the previous year. This means that at the end of the second year, you would have earned an additional $11 for a total of $121. This is one of the craziest thing about money in compounding. $1 or 1% might not seem like a lot, but it can have a massive impact on how much money you have over time thanks to compounding. To illustrate, let's look at what happens to that $100 if we keep it invested at 10% annual growth for 40 years without adding any more money to it. Yes, that's right. That original $100 investment will be worth $5,370 in 40 years, and you didn't even contribute any additional money to it. That's a 5,270% increase. If you continue to add to your principal, that money will be worth even more. Even if you add only $1 per month to your original $100 contribution, you'd have deposited a total of $480 over 40 years, but it would be worth $11,694. Awesome. If Travis has been saving $3,000 per year, and that money has been growing at the average 7% annual rate, he would have $142,348 after saving for 20 years. This is certainly a lot of money, but it's not enough to live on if he plans to retire by 50 and lives into his 70s or 80s. And this assumes he was smart and put his money in a total stock market index fund, which tracks the performance of the entire stock market and is therefore most likely to generate the average 7% return over time. If he didn't, he would most likely have even less saved. I don't mean to pick on Travis. In fact, most Americans approach retirement the same way he does. As of 2016, the median household income in the United States is $57,617, and the average American is saving only 3.6% of their income per year. That means the average American household is saving $2,074 per year, even less than what we assume Travis is saving. As mentioned in the last chapter, the average millennial is saving between 3 and 5% of his or her income, which, based on the average millennial income of $35,592, equals about $1,067 $1,776 per year. For simplicity's sake, let's round that up to $2,000 a year. Saving $2,000 per year growing 7% per year equals $470,967 in 40 years. While $470,967 is a lot of money, keep in mind that due to inflation, which is unpredictable, $470,967 likely won't have the same purchasing power in 40 years that it does today. Inflation increases or decreases what you can buy with money. Due to inflation in the United States, the value of money decreases over time. So if you need only $1 to buy something today, you will need more than $1 to buy the same thing in the future. This is why you could buy a cup of coffee for 15 in 1920, but it costs over $2 today. Inflation is generally caused by supply, demand, production costs, and tax policies. It is country-specific, so it can vary dramatically by the strength of a country's currency and its purchasing power. This is why it's more affordable to live in certain countries if you currently live in the United States, where the dollar is strong compared to other currencies. You can use that strong dollar to live in many places in the world for less than you would spend living in the United States. For example, it's currently a lot cheaper to live in Bali, Thailand, or many South American countries. In the United States, inflation causes prices to increase between 2 and 4% every year on average, which means any money saved today will buy less in the future. However, this is just the average. In some years, for example, in the 1980s, inflation was over 10%. Of course, not everything rises in price, and in fact some things actually get cheaper over time. But as a whole, the staples of life, like housing, transportation, food, energy, and clothes, will be more expensive in 10 years than they are today. However, there are ways to insulate yourself from inflation. Just because prices will be a lot higher in the future doesn't necessarily mean your money won't go as far. You just have to be creative, buy less, and be more self-sufficient. Christy and Bryce, who retired in their early 30s, have created what's known as an inflation shield, where they've essentially minimized the impact of inflation on their savings by living in countries with lower inflation than their home country of Canada. Depending on where you live and the strength of your home currency, you may be able to get a lot more for your money living in another country or utilizing cheaper services outside of your country, like healthcare, which is significantly cheaper outside the United States and even free in some countries. Also, if you invest your money in the stock market, you will still end up with more money than you started with, because the average 7% annual return of the stock market has already been adjusted for inflation and dividends, so 7% is the real average annual return. Even so, you should always pay attention to ways you can minimize the effects of inflation on your money as much as possible, so you have more money to invest and keep invested. Over the past decade, inflation has been at historic lows and the stock market returns have effectively insulated investors from inflation. But it's realistic to estimate that inflation will increase over the coming decades, and even a small 2 to 3% average increase per year would significantly reduce the purchasing power of your savings in the future. For example, adjusted for 2 to 3% inflation, that $470,967 the average American saving 5% could have after 40 years would have the purchasing power of only approximately $144,378 in today's dollars. Given that the average life expectancy in America is roughly 79 years, you would have to make that $144,378 last for roughly 14 years if you retired at 65. Not factoring in any Social Security benefits you may receive. That leaves you $10,312 in 2019 purchasing power to live on per year. No matter how you slice it, we are way behind. If you're reading this book, you're probably interested in being in a position to retire as quickly as possible. Let's assume you work for a pretty sweet company that will match any contribution you make to your 401 up to 4%. And you're already saving 10% of your income in your 401, so you're effectively saving 14% of your annual income. If you do have a 401 with an employer match and you're not contributing any money or not contributing enough money to max out the match, then put this book down right now, log into your 401 account, and start contributing at least enough to receive your employer match. It's completely free money, a 100% return. Do it. If you are already saving more than 10%, first, congratulations. You are saving more than 99% of the United States population. But don't break out the champagne just yet. You still might not be able to retire. Let's say you make $50,000 a year. If you started saving 14% of your salary at age 25 and your savings grow at 7% annually, you'll have about $1,117,589 at the age of 65. Not bad for 40 years of saving, but it's still 40 years of saving. And while $1,117,589 might sound like a lot, let's say inflation increases just an extra 2.5% per year. Then your savings amounts to only $416,224 in 2019 purchasing power. That's still not bad, but because you've been investing in a 401, you haven't paid taxes on that money until you withdraw it. If we factor in taxes, that $416,224 could be worth between 15 and 35% less, depending on what tax bracket you are in when you start to withdraw the money. Alright, enough of that depressing news. You get the point. The first major problem with traditional retirement advice is that even if you follow it perfectly, you still might not have enough to live on when you are in your 60s. When I did this calculation, it blew me away. Clearly the popular advice to save 5 to 10% of your income is not enough. While I'll help you calculate your target savings rate later in the book, you should be saving as much money as early and often as you can. If you want to be sure you will be able to retire at 65, you need to start saving at least 20% of your income from the age of 30. Here's how big a difference it makes. If you are making an average of $50,000 over this 35-year period and saving 20%, or approximately $10,000, you'd have deposited $349,860 by the time you retire. Factoring in the 7% growth rate adjusted for inflation, that investment would be worth $1,615,340. And this is assuming that your salary never increases, which it very likely would over time, so you will have even more money. We're writing retirement. Saving 20% of your income will significantly increase the chance that you can retire after 40 years. But this brings us to the second and third major problems with traditional money advice. It is not designed to help you retire early and requires you to work full-time between your 20s and your 60s. There is nothing inherently wrong with this, and people can live perfectly happy lives working for 40 years and then enjoying the fruits of their labor when they're older. But it requires a huge trade-off, basing 40 years of your life around earning money, and the payoff is not guaranteed. Unless you go the extra mile and do your own research, the only information you're usually given about saving for the long haul is to invest a certain portion of your annual salary into a retirement account like a 401 or an IRA. And because most of us aren't taught any more than that, we don't know enough to question this advice. We assume if everyone else is doing it, and everyone else seems to be chugging along just fine, then it's good enough for us. All my life, I had grown up around people who worked and hoped they could retire one day. Neither of my parents come from money, and I knew growing up that we didn't have a lot of money. We weren't poor by any stretch, but given that we lived outside of Washington, D.C., surrounded by some of the wealthiest suburbs in America, my parents lived a frugal lifestyle. My parents bought used cars, we took an annual beach vacation, and we drove 12 hours each way to spend holidays in Indiana. Despite our East Coast address, my parents retained their Midwestern values. I was consistently exposed to the classic American work ethic. Get a job, pay your dues, save wisely, and if you play your cards right, you can retire sometime in your golden years. Everyone I knew worked well into their 60s, if not longer. My grandparents worked well into their 70s because they couldn't afford to retire earlier than that. As of this writing, both of my parents are in their 60s and still working. They probably have enough money to retire, but they worry it might not be enough in the long run. They also both wonder what they would do with their time if they did retire. When you spend almost your entire life working for a paycheck, what happens when you break that routine? What happens when your identity is wrapped up in your title and job responsibilities? What happens when you're now too tired to pursue your dreams, or maybe it's been so long that you lost your dreams along the way? My dad recently told me about a few of his neighbors who had retired after 40 years in the workforce. They spend a lot of their time in their yards picking up sticks, he said. I don't know these people, but I can't imagine this is what they hoped they'd be doing in the twilight of their lives. This illustrates a common problem with the typical approach to retirement that few people consider, despite the fact that they work so hard to be able to retire. 48% of Americans over 55 haven't even thought about what they want to do when, if they retire. I don't know about you, but this makes me pretty sad, because it means many Americans are choosing to work for several decades of their lives without giving any thought to what they're working toward. They have collectively adopted the traditional retirement narrative, work until your 60s or 70s, without pausing to question whether this is what they really want out of life or if there's a better way. Until I started questioning this narrative on my own, I was doing exactly the same thing. No one ever told me I couldn't retire in my 20s or 30s. The idea was simply so unusual that it never came up. The only person I knew growing up who retired early was Jim, another family friend, who retired at the age of 49 after saving and inheriting enough money to do so. This stuck in my mind at an early age after hearing my parents talking about it. The blind acceptance of this narrative has created a society full of people who are living lives that they didn't really choose and deferring their dreams, sometimes forever, because they assume they have to work to make money. In her deeply moving book The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, Nurse Bronnie Ware says the top 2 regrets of those facing the end of their lives are I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me, and I wish I hadn't worked so hard. She goes on to say that the vast majority of her patients never accomplished at least half of their dreams, often because of their choice to keep working instead of following them. These people pushed on, saved, and worked only to look back and wonder what it was all for. Is this what you want? Do you want to defer your dreams until sometime in the far-off future when you might not have the energy or drive to do anything but pick up sticks all day? It was only after I started my quest to save $1 million as quickly as possible that I started to notice the limits to typical financial advice and the traditional retirement narrative. As I learned more about how to earn, save, and invest money, I realized that making money quickly is not nearly as complicated as it's made out to be. In fact, given the efficiencies of the internet, it's easier to do than ever before. What is difficult is letting go of the assumption that there is only one surefire path to retirement, earning a steady paycheck for several decades and saving a portion of it for later, and that any other path is reserved for the lucky few. It's important to note that there are some limits, and being able to retire early is definitely a privilege that not everyone has or will have. There are millions of people in the United States who are simply trying to keep a roof over their heads and buy food to feed their families. If you are making less than $25,000 per year, then it will be a lot harder to retire early because you simply won't be able to save as much as someone earning a higher income. Unless, of course, you can live on $5,000 a year, like the happy wanderer I met in Flagstaff, Arizona. I'm not saying it isn't possible. It will just require a lot of creativity and sacrifice. That being said, one of the cornerstones of my own financial freedom strategy was figuring out ways to earn more money rather than simply focusing on ways to save it. Instead of spending all my time pinching pennies, I spent it looking for ways to make more money. If you are making $25,000, then I want to help you make $50,000, or if you are making $50,000, I want to help you make $100,000, and so on. The more money you make, the more money you can invest, and the faster you will reach financial freedom. Trust me, the hardest part about becoming financially independent isn't actually doing it. Once you learn the basic concepts of earning, saving, and investing, executing the strategy is relatively simple and you will start seeing results immediately. That's not to say it's easy. It requires an incredible amount of persistence and discipline, but it's certainly not rocket science. The hardest part of fast-tracking financial freedom is learning to look at the world differently, to accept that even though you may not know a single person who has done it, it is possible to earn enough so that within just a few years, you will never have to worry about money again. When you're just starting out, it can be incredibly difficult and intimidating to ignore all the experts and gurus and other people in your life, people like Travis, who keep telling you the surest and best routes to retirement or making money. Or to ignore your friends, family, or coworkers when they laugh and tell you there's no way you can actually make a lot of money and retire early. But if you want to live life on your terms, you need to manage money on your own terms as well, and that requires a new perspective. Time versus money. One of the main reasons traditional retirement and personal finance advice is so limiting is because it is based on the false assumption that money is limited. The vast majority of personal finance advice out there is focused on cutting back and spending less and doesn't acknowledge the simple truth that money is limited only if you don't try to make more of it. Money is inherently infinite. It's a human invention, and as long as people are helping the economy grow by working, spending, and investing, governments can print more money to keep up. Yes, there is and always has been a massive gap between those who have a lot of money and those who don't, and billions of people live in places where they don't have the money-making opportunities that those of us in democratic, capitalist societies have. But in theory, there is enough money in the world for everyone to have all the money they need. The problem is, many people don't take advantage of these opportunities and instead accept whatever money they are given, generally whatever their bosses are willing to pay, without considering other ways to make more money. They say they want to make more money but spend all their free time binging on Netflix, gaming, or just wasting time. This is too bad, because when we believe that money is scarce, we end up sacrificing a great deal of time in order to make and save it. And unlike money, time is inherently limited. In one of my favorite books, Your Money or Your Life, author Vicki Robin asks us to ponder a simple but transcendent question. What are the hours of your life worth? What are you willing to trade them for? How much money are you willing to trade for your time? If we believe money is scarce, we will spend precious time trying to save it when we actually don't have to. We'll spend hours clipping coupons, driving an extra mile to save 3 cents a gallon on gas, or hunting for a deal online just to shave a few bucks off our bill. I once spent over 4 hours looking for the best deal on a new TV. It was only later that I considered that the money I'd saved hardly made up for the time I'd wasted. Time that I will never get back. The same goes for earning money. Every minute we spend trying to make money is a minute we can't use to do something else. It's gone forever. Most people work between 70,000 and 80,000 hours over the course of their careers, but even that doesn't account for all the time they spend because they have to work. The average American commutes 52 minutes to and from work each day. That's about 8,700 hours over the course of a typical career. All told, you're spending more than a year of your life doing something you wouldn't have to do if you didn't have to earn money to survive. Even these stark numbers don't tell the whole story. The average American works 34.4 hours a week. If we add in time for commuting, that's about 38.7 hours. There are 168 hours in a week, so after you subtract about 56 hours for sleeping, that leaves 73.3 hours. That sounds like a lot, more than double what you spend working in a week. But consider that not all hours are created equal. Studies have shown that we are most alert and energetic early in the day, but that's the time we're usually working. By the time we get off the clock, we're usually so tired or run down from working all day and commuting that we don't want to do anything except sit on the couch. This is why the average American watches 5.4 hours of TV a day. Sure, we have weekends, but how often do you spend those running around trying to catch up on all the errands and chores you didn't get to during the week? The point is, you are trading the best hours of your week and your life for a paycheck. I'm not anti-work. In fact, I like working. Humans need to work to be happy. But like time, not all work is created equal. There is a huge difference between working at a job you hate, being stuck at a desk or on the clock for 40 or more hours a week, and doing work you love and are passionate about on your own time, and having the freedom to do something else if you want to. The same trade-off occurs when you look at your life as a whole. You typically have more energy and are healthier in your 20s, 30s, and 40s than you are later in life. But if you have to spend those decades working for money, then you're not taking full advantage of this time. From a financial standpoint, if you gradually save a small percentage of your income over the course of 40+ years, you're wasting time that your money could use to grow. When you invest money in the stock market, it grows in value over time because it earns returns every year. If you're saving only 5 to 10% of your annual income each year over the course of several decades, you're not giving your money nearly as much opportunity to compound as you would if you invested more earlier in your life. You are wasting time. Don't waste time. You are in control. Remember, it's your time. If you take advantage of opportunities to make more and make the most of your money, you can save a lot more money and correspondingly even more time. Every $1 invested today is worth hours, if not days, of your freedom in the future. The more you save today, the more time you buy in the future. The earlier you start and the more you save, the sooner you will reach financial independence. This is at the heart of my strategy, and it will rapidly decrease the number of years and the amount of money you need to reach financial independence. Remember, the key to fast-tracking financial freedom is to make and invest as much money as early and frequently as you can. Fortunately, the relationship between money and time is not strictly linear. If you want to make more money, you don't necessarily need to sacrifice more time to do so. You don't have to be limited by your own hours or even the hours in the day. You don't have to look far to find examples of people who can work half as many hours to earn twice as much money as someone else, and it's not always because they are smarter or more experienced, or work in a more lucrative field. You can even find people who make money by trading very little, if any, of their own time because they've invested a lot of time up front in building consistent long-term income streams. Likewise, people who invest their money spend minimal time trying to make that money grow because as long as their money stays invested in the stock market, it will grow automatically over time. This is known as passive income because you don't have to actively do anything to earn it, and it is the ultimate money-making strategy. What's better than being able to make money doing literally nothing? Once you reach the point where you no longer have to trade your time for money, you can choose to spend that time however you please. When you have enough, you can quit the higher-paying job you hate to take a lower-paying one that is meaningful to you. You can explore, grow, give back, follow your passions, and find new passions. You can travel the world, pick up a new hobby, learn a new skill, volunteer. The possibilities are infinite. Anita retired at 33 so she could sleep in every day and travel the world without having to negotiate vacation days with her boss or worry about missing an important email. Sarah retired at 32 so she could learn to play the violin and start a band. Michelle did it at 28 so she could live in an RV, travel the country, and blog full-time. Justin did it so he could sit in a hammock at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday and read a good book. Christy and Bryce did it at 31 and 32, respectively, so they could travel the world on a whim. JP did it so she could walk her dog in the middle of the day, discover new passions, and raise a family. Brandon retired at 34 so he could spend his time making music and exploring new passions. I did it because I didn't want to spend the best years of my life working in a poorly lit cubicle at a stressful job I didn't particularly enjoy. And because I did it, I have the time to write this book and teach others how to escape the rat race. So how do you make enough money to retire in as little time as possible? The first step is to figure out how much money you need. Recap. 1. Money is unlimited. Time is not. Don't waste time. 2. The traditional approach to retirement has 3 major problems. It doesn't work for most people. 2. You end up spending the most valuable years of your life working for money. 3. It's not designed to help you retire as quickly as possible. 3. Compounding exponentially increases the value of your money over time, and the earlier and more you invest, the faster your money will grow. The key to fast-tracking financial freedom is making and investing as much money as early and frequently as you can. 4. Inflation causes prices to go up every year for most staples like housing, transportation, and food, but there are ways to minimize the impact of inflation so you will need less money and can let your investments keep growing. 5. Don't defer your dreams into the future. The top 2 regrets of those facing the end of their lives are I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me, and I wish I hadn't worked so hard. 6. The vast majority of personal finance advice out there is focused on helping you maximize whatever limited money you already have. It's focused on frugality, scarcity, cutting back, and spending less, and doesn't acknowledge that money is limited only if you don't try to make more. 7. The relationship between money and time is not strictly linear. If you want to make more money, you don't necessarily need to sacrifice more time to do so.